September 11th happened to me, and I was supposed to be having breakfast. We had reservations on Windows on the World, on the top of the second tower, for 8:30 Tuesday morning, September 11th, 2001, my parents and I. And my parents are from New York, but never visited New York, and I'm living with Daniel Berrigan in the Upper West Side with our big community, and they called the week before and said, we're coming, we're gonna do all the sites, and then we're gonna end with breakfast at the Windows on the World. And I was like, okay. And they came, and we did a lot of sightseeing, and then we had mass with Dan and my community the night before, and that day my mother said, well, I feel sorry for you having to take the subway all that way from the Upper West Side to the Twin Towers. We changed the reservation to another hotel on the top of that hotel overlooking Central Park, which is only a few blocks. And I was like, whatever. And so they left, and I went downtown and by chance met the head of the Red Cross. As they were opening the family center, there were 10,000 relatives on the street. And I showed up dressed in clerics, and she said to me, good, you're here. After we process every missing person report, you go stand in the corner, we'll have everybody go talk to you. I said, well, what do I do? She said, just be listening and compassionate. That was so funny. I went, oh, okay. At the end of the day, she said, we were watching you, and we want you to coordinate all the chaplains programs. And I had 600 chaplains ministering to 50,000 direct relatives after September 11th, 24/7 for 3 months. And then once a week, I worked all day at Ground Zero. And on Saturday afternoons, we had our protests in Times Square and Union Square and Washington Square against the U.S. war in Afghanistan, as you do. I thought this was normal, Pat. Love your neighbor, love your enemies. Well, the New York Times wrote about me, and that was very weird. And the church officials and the bishop and the cardinal and the Jesuits got so many complaints, I was immediately kicked out of New York. And I'm such a nice guy. I'm trying to make them laugh here, Pat, and it's not working. So I had friends in New Mexico, and they said, hey, you know, house, way off the grid with no drinking water, no utility-based electricity, 75 years old house, brick floors, a big adobe fireplace, looks like railroad ties, and looking out massive windows over 100 miles of pristine New Mexico landscape. It was incredible. And that's what I've written my new book about, that they will inherit the earth, peace and nonviolence in a time of climate change. My journey into deeper oneness with the earth, living out the beatitude. Blessed are the meek, the gentle, the nonviolent, they shall inherit the earth. Jesus made that connection long ago. So I say all that because I'm just sharing some of my journey with you. The call to be meticulous people of meticulous interpersonal nonviolence. Meticulous nonviolence toward every human being on the planet. Nonviolent toward your spouse. Nonviolence toward your parents, your children, your neighbors, the people at work, people in the church. It's going to be rough. Nonviolent toward the people at the Bath Iron Works. Nonviolent toward everybody in Maine. Nonviolent toward every human being on the planet, especially the people we're trying to kill all over the world. And then nonviolence toward the creatures, and nonviolence towards creation. How's that going for you? That's what, huh? So we want to be nonviolent toward ourselves, but we want to be nonviolent toward everybody. And we're sitting here at this lovely peace gathering today going, well, this is all very nice, and I love peace. As that lady once said to me, peace? I'm a big fan of peace. But sometimes you just got to kill somebody. She stood up and said that in a packed church. And she just says what we all think. It's called the just war theory. Yeah, Jesus was a nice guy, but we're much smarter, and you got to kill Hitler or Saddam, or I will hunt down and kill Osama bin Laden, Barack Obama said. This is not the way of Jesus or nonviolence. Who's the person you'd like to get back at with a little revenge? I'm just saying. Who's the person in your life who pushes all your buttons, who triggers your violence, who you want to really at least slug, maybe kill, or a few people you want to kill? They're your teachers of nonviolence. Isn't that wonderful? Aren't you lucky to have them in your life? Because first of all, they're showing you how violent you are, and you think you're going around as a holy peacemaker. I'm just saying. Because this is the way I am. And we need to really reflect on how can we deepen our nonviolence in our relationships? And be so conscious and aware as we're interacting with people that we're really trying to be nonviolent. Of course, I'm talking about love and compassion and peaceableness. These are just words. It's language to look at our behavior. Apparently, if you touch Jesus, you just feel better. I'm being silly, but he didn't have a drop of violence in him. So we are healed by a nonviolent person. We want to try to let go of our violence so much that we can become, dare I say, as nonviolent as Jesus. I think it's possible. He wouldn't have told us this. And people who are like this. Unknown people, maybe your grandmother, and I can add Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Buddhist Zen master, who is like that. He's so gentle. I was telling somebody who was asking me, he had 1,000 friends who were killed in the Vietnam War. He should be locked up. Or wanting to kill a lot of people. He's so destroyed, and he's gone so deep into nonviolence. So this is doable, and I can testify that from having been around the world. So I invite you just now, we have a little bit of time to reflect on your relationships, on how you practice nonviolence toward everybody, and where do you need a little work. And that's why I put it that way, who the people who trigger you. How can you become more and more a person, a bodhisattva of interpersonal nonviolence? How can you behave so that your own violence and anger is not your motivating force, even as you're with somebody? And it has nothing to do with that person. Maybe the person sitting in front of you is blocking your view and you want to beat them up, move out of the way. I keep hitting this table, I'm sorry. And it's just your, predilection, the way you were, that triggers you. And you're looking at being mindful and peaceful towards the person next to you who triggers that. And Gandhi says we're going to expand this methodology of interpersonal nonviolence toward the whole planet and help us all become sober people of nonviolence. It's very powerful. Have you been trained in nonviolent conflict resolution? I think that Martin Luther King, in every single march up until Memphis, you couldn't march with him unless you'd done 1 hour or 3 hours of nonviolence training. You need to do this in Maine if you're not doing it as things get worse. And in the brochure that you have in your packet from my group, Pace Bene, Campaign Nonviolence, we have a great program, a book called Engage, which is a 10-part workshop on the methodology of interpersonal nonviolence, nonviolent conflict resolution. And it's really good to have role-playing exercises whenever you do a demonstration. But we want to apply this in our own lives so that we can be nonviolent even in the face of a threat of personal assault. This is doable. And I've experienced, it's why I worked in soup kitchens and in prisons. You know, if you respond nonviolently, and if it's truly the method of God, and Gandhi says it works, experiment with it. But it's scary and risky. Usually if you're going to fight back with someone who's threatening you, then you know you're going to get violence. But if you don't fight back and you tap into their humanity and engage the person as a human being, it's very disarming. Like I remember somebody was beating me up, and I ran a drop-in center for the homeless in Washington, D.C., and this poor homeless guy, and I was going, why are you doing that? What's wrong? And he just stopped and started to cry. I'm just having such a bad day. We want to be people in our relationships who are really nonviolent. We want to try to let go of resentments. Keep trying to be really kind, practicing loving kindness, forgiving everyone, and as our friend said, creating communities of nonviolence around us, and intentionally joining and forming affinity groups of peace and nonviolence, and teaching ourselves and others how to respond someday, hopefully, instinctively, nonviolently. We've got down how to respond violently, instinctively. We know how to do that, but we have to learn. This is what Paul Chappelle his whole workshop is about. I don't think I've met Paul, but that Pat said is coming to speak. He's saying you have to learn how to read. Exactly. So you have to learn how to become nonviolent. We've all been taught violence, so this is very helpful. Well, this just opens up lots of questions for us. Who are you afraid of? You know, and that it can trigger our violence or revenge. And how can you move more into just kind of a general personal policy of universal nonviolence? I guess I go on at length about this in the book, but I don't really know what else to say except to keep asking you questions about this, to envision the nonviolence in our own lives. When we were having peace vigils. We started in July 2001. Dan Berrigan and I and the Catholic workers and some friends in New York City. We were very upset about the U.S. war in Colombia. So we went to Union Square and we had big anti-war signs. When then September 11th happened, that went on for about 7 years. One day, about a month after September 11th, we had these big demonstrations, but there were the smaller Our Peace group. If you know New York City, Union Square, it's a very major place. We had these massive banners that said something like, "Don't bomb Afghanistan, war is not the answer, let's together work for peace." And here's Daniel Berrigan, and here's Bob Keck, our friend who's Dan's peer, 3 Jesuits, Catholic workers. We're here. There's 1 million people milling about. New Yorkers were covering, and this Marine came through the crowd right up to me to kill me in front of everybody. "How dare you? I'm going to kill you right now for attacking the U.S. military. We've got to bomb them. What would you do if I killed you right now in front of everybody?" And I said, "Oh, thank God. That'd be fabulous." No, I didn't say that. I said, "Well, I would die if you killed me. And then I'd go to heaven. And I'd be with Jesus for eternity with the saints. You, on the other hand, would be arrested and put in prison for the rest of your life. And you would regret what you had done. And there'd be discussion about executions. And my friends and I, they'd be very sad. And we'd all be praying for you." And he went and turned and walked away. And one of the other Catholic workers went up to him and started talking to him, and he broke down crying. And he came out and apologized. This has been my life story. Maybe it's your life story too. We can train ourselves to respond nonviolently. And I could talk about my family, and they have very difficult problems with me. But for me, the real problem is the church. It's church people that I find the most difficult. And I see that in the story of Jesus working with the religious authorities who eventually bring about his death. There's something about, and it's men and women. When you get into organized religion, suddenly you're all about power and me. Listen, you just leave nonviolence, and you see it there and you see it today. So we have to help and really reach out and engage in active love, especially with our religious leaders, our priests and ministers, to teach them about nonviolence. This is critically important. So I'm not talking about passivity. I'm talking about really trying to be nonviolent in our lives, in all our relationships, and the way we are in the world. And that's an active public role, I think. And we're going to talk about being part of the movement. Hey, Bill, I know, Bill, can he hear me, Ursula? Bill, can you hear me? Come on up here. I want to demonstrate something for the Sermon on the Mount. I'm going to slug Bill, and then we're going to explore how he didn't respond nonviolently. Somebody clapped in the back, Bill, when they said I was going to slug you. So you're looking at me again like, what the heck are you talking about, John? Like there's a methodology of nonviolent conflict resolution. It's right there in the Sermon on the Mount. Have you all studied Walter Wink? Raise your hand if you know who Walter Wink is. So that's not many. This theologian, my friend, he was from Massachusetts. He died a few years ago. He wrote a book about nonviolence called Engaging the Powers, and for the first time in 2,000 years explored nonviolence. He went beyond Gandhi's understanding. But the way I understand, so in Matthew 5, you have the Beatitudes, and then you have the 6th antitheses. You have heard it said, thou shalt not kill. The first one is, I say don't even get angry. And we'd be like, excuse me, Jesus, what are you, crazy? Be reconciled. The 5th antithesis is the one I want to talk about now because Gandhi read it every day. And the 6th one, you have heard it said, love your countrymen and hate your enemies, but I say love your enemies. Bless those. The 5th one, this all goes back to Tolstoy. This is very interesting to me. Tolstoy is reading the 5th antithesis one day, and a light goes on, and he changed his life, and he spent the last 25 years of his life, if you study his life, just writing about the 5th antithesis, Matthew 5, verse 37. You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, according to Walter Wink's translation, offer no violent resistance to one who does evil. I'm going to repeat that. Offer no violent resistance to one who does evil. Meticulous interpersonal nonviolence. That's a commandment if you want to follow this guy. Instead, we've totally rejected that and gone back to an eye for an eye, which Gandhi just says leaves the whole world blind. Then Jesus gives 5 examples about how to do that. He's teaching these poor people in the outskirts of Galilee. The first one says, when someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other cheek. And we're going, huh? So I'm going to slug Bill here and show you. Stand back a little bit here. Just stand there. I just recited the text to you. And what's wrong with the scenario? I just said the exact sentence quoting from the Greek. What did Jesus say? There's actually 5 concrete examples. The commandment is offer no violent resistance to one who does evil. When someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other cheek. It's not possible to strike Bill on the right cheek. Did you all know that?
Yes.
You did it, Ursula. Did everybody else know that? This is really important. He's doing a workshop on nonviolence with these poor people. St. Peter's going, oh, come on, man. I'm trying to make them laugh here, Pat. Because, like nobody's left-handed. Actually, in those days, you didn't use the left hand even for fighting. It was for the bathroom, for unclean things. This is really an interesting thing. So Jesus is saying when someone strikes you on the right cheek, well, then how do I strike Bill on the right cheek? In Jesus' workshop on living a nonviolent life. Bill is kneeling down. I'm the horrible Roman soldier. What are they doing? They're barreling through Galilee. It's the most horrible, poor, impoverished place on the planet, the outskirts of this evil Roman Empire. What do? They steal everybody's little stuff they got, burn down the houses, rape the women, kill the kids, and make the men carry the stuff, and they're overnight part of the Roman army, and then they're all being killed, massacred. It's top-down humiliation, which is at the heart of imperial violence. Bill is kneeling down. I'm using the back of my hand. You nobody. Yeah. Top-down oppression, humiliation, which is at the heart of structural violence. Jesus is teaching Peter and Bill, to turn the other cheek, saying, you can't humiliate me. I'm a human being. You have to deal with me as a human being and equal to you. Well, obviously, you're not buying this. I don't think they bought it then either. But I can't, stop without mentioning the creatures and Mother Earth, too, in this part. So why I wrote this book is I realized Thomas Merton, this is my book, They Will Inherit the Earth, he said in 1965 that we're wrong with the translation, blessed are the meek. It's not meekness. That's a Hebrew word that runs from the Psalms. Merton said this, it's all wrong. It's active, creative, nonviolence like Martin Luther King. And then I went, oh my gosh, because I've been now studying the Sermon on the Mount, because I had read about Gandhi, reading it, and I realized this Jesus is saying, if Merton's right, and Gandhi's right, Jesus is saying, okay, all you people of active, loving nonviolence, my followers, you are one with creation. Wow, how did he put that together? But then I started to do the math. Well, we got rid of the Sermon on the Mount. 315, Constantine, the emperor, supposedly claims I'm now a Christian. Christianity is an illegal religion. You all can be Christians now. It's legal. Therefore, you can all join the military and kill for the Roman Empire. He threw out the Sermon on the Mount, turned to the pagan Cicero, began to come up with the just war theory, and we all went, oh, great, now we get to kill. We don't have to follow this stuff anymore. And that led to the Crusades of the Middle Ages, churchmen burning women at the stake, white churchmen owning Africans, human beings. And today, it's no different. I mean, it's the priests and ministers bless all the bombs in Los Alamos. There's 100 Bible studies at the Pentagon every day, masses every day, blessing the killing. Wait a second. If we've rejected Jesus' nonviolence, and for the mind of the nonviolent Jesus, that leads to oneness with the earth, catastrophic climate change is inevitable because we don't care. We're not going to do this hard work. It's easy to be violent. Anybody can be violent. To be nonviolent is hard. This is the spiritual life. It's hard work. We don't want to do it. Then I'm saying let's get with the program. So we're decades away now from 6 million species becoming extinct. And I have to read this because I don't want to talk about this. It's too overwhelming and despairing. But I've spent 5 years going to conferences, studying everything about catastrophic climate change because Jesus wants us to live that. And we're disconnected from the earth. But you and I want to be the people, mature people of nonviolence in our relationships, with our attitudes towards everybody on the planet, and the creatures, and Mother Earth. Well, in catastrophic climate change, as I understand it, to put it at my kindergarten level, which is so overwhelming, but we're going to have our eyes open to look at it, it's about the fossil fuels taking the oil and the gas and the coal out of the ground, and after 100 years from that, that's releasing the carbon in the atmosphere, which leads to higher temperatures, which then leads to the melting of the polar ice caps, which leads to the rise of the waters. 37% of the human race lives along the ocean. 100 years from now, they all have to flee. So you have hundreds and hundreds of millions of people fleeing the coasts, which leads to what the scientists are saying is so much worse than anything in the mainstream papers or news. There's at least 100 wars before the end of the century, just over land and water. Global migration. Because of total hurricanes, tornadoes, droughts, fires, rain bombs, all the stuff that we're seeing. 3 nor'easters in 10 days. It's unbelievable. I mean, Tuesday there were almost 15 inches of snow in Boston. That has never happened before on March 13th. You know all of this. No ice in the Arctic, so no polar bears, no coral reefs, no Marshall Islands, no Bangladesh. One could go on and on. Nonviolence or non-existence. What I want us to do is really consciously be these people that Dr. King calls us to be, of active nonviolence, which means we're going to do our part to reject non-existence. Which means if we're going to live out that beatitude, not to mention all the other beatitudes, we need to get back into reconnecting with oneness with the earth. How's that going for you? You know, all our lives, all our people, all our relationships, all the creatures, and Mother Earth. So in the book, I talk about, well, and this is in the Nonviolent Life and my new book, They Will Inherit the Earth. The first, I think, only way to cope with all of this is grief. Grief, grief, grief. This is what all the religious leaders of the world are saying. But you already know that, because just before he says, blessed are the meek, they will inherit the earth, blessed are the nonviolent, he says, blessed are those who mourn. If you care about Mother Earth and the creatures and our suffering sisters and brothers in Afghanistan and Iraq and Yemen and Palestine and Libya that we're bombing, and other people we want to nuke like North Korea and Iran, or the 800 million people are starving, and you do care. You are grieving people. So we have to make this a new spiritual practice. No, we're angry. Well, Jesus says that doesn't help. That's not the emotional life of nonviolence. And we don't want to be fueled from anger, and we don't want to give into fear. But he urges grief and joy. It's very powerful. But I want to say this, especially as we're looking at what we're doing to Mother Earth. And it's full on now. And that has to become really more intentional. Apparently the methodology is, I mean, we're not allowed to grieve in this country. I saw that in September 11th, encouraged not to. If you formally grieve, like Jesus arrives in Jerusalem on his campaign of nonviolence, what does he do? He breaks down sobbing. If today you had only known the things that make for peace. If you take time once a week to really feel the pain of Mother Earth and lament, it will break our hard, violent hearts a little bit. They'll begin to crack. This is good. Because then that could lead to compassion. And we could become people of universal compassion. And compassion always leads to action. Jesus then takes action, public action, civil disobedience in the temple. So I invite you to reflect on that. We have to practice real mindfulness in our relationships to one another. And by that I mean learning to see everybody as your brother, as your sister, as God. For Christians, you see Christ in everyone. You're just in the beatific vision every day. And the creatures. And Mother Earth. If we're disconnected, this weird connection Jesus said 2,000 years ago, nonviolence, oneness with the earth, and we ourselves are to blame, you and I want to start really remaking that spiritual connection. Does this make sense? So that, I think the best way to do that is to be mindfully aware and conscious, not just of one another, but the birds, the trees, and the oceans, and the sky. Consider the lilies of the field, someone said. Look at the birds of the air. Learn the lesson of the fig tree. That's a quote from the gospel. Jesus walked the earth, knew every animal and plant, was very aware. We don't even have to walk on water. We just have to walk peacefully on earth. And in the book I write about my friends. Well, that means to reflect on what you eat, what you wear, how you live, connections, connections, connections. So, and things like, you know, if you're involved in the environmental movement, like 5 years ago, the thing you would have heard everyone say over and over again was change your light bulbs. Remember that? Did a lot of you change your light bulbs? Nobody's saying that anymore. Have you noticed that? It's not.
Bigger cars.
Huh?
We're back to bigger cars.
Actually, it's too late
It's too late.
with the light bulbs. So the message from the global leadership is movements, movement, movement. We need political will. And that's what I want to talk about after lunch. That's this bottom-up, people power, grassroots movement. But you still got to change your light bulb. And you still got to figure out your carbon footprint and, you know, drive less, bike more, plant trees, support these groups. Get rid of plastic if you can. You know, there's that big mound of plastic floating in the Pacific, twice the size of Texas, and in the Caribbean too. But try to go solar. and it helped Maine become solar. Germany is on the verge of going 100% solar. All of these things. And you're not going to like this, but I'm now saying this. We all have to become vegetarians. The United Nations are issuing these long, desperate statements saying, I had to write it down, eating meat causes 40% more greenhouse gas emissions than all cars, trucks, and planes combined. What? The world's 1.3 billion cattle release infinite tons of methane into the atmosphere, not to mention the hundreds of millions of tons of carbon from the fires burned to create the pastures for the cows or the grain stolen from the starving people in Brazil to feed our cattle so we can buy our McDonald's. What? Eating a 1% reduction in worldwide meat eating. If 1% of the human race went vegetarian, that would equal a $3 trillion investment in solar energy, which is way beyond anything anybody's even conceiving. I could go on and on with this. They're talking about connections. Of course, meat is all poison now. It's full of chemicals. But if you've been to a slaughterhouse, that's not really nonviolent. I'm just saying. But if you care about the earth, those days are over, friends. Now, I've heard Thich Nhat Hanh speak on that for 3 hours. Gandhi, don't even mention eating meat to him. He would just go, they're carnivores. I thought you'd laugh at that because I think it's so funny. The way he was like, what? He had that sentence, the measure of any society is how it treats its creatures, its animals. So that's why whoever asked the question in the back, a community is critical. This is way beyond us now. And Tutu's saying we got to do this till the day I die. Whatever you do is going to be sowing seeds for a future you're not going to live to see. But you can still go deeper into all of this. I'm talking about nonviolence to yourself, nonviolence to all people, toward all the creatures, and to Mother Earth. What's your next step? Where do you need to go farther? And why not rise to the occasion and push yourself a little more? And that means risk. That means action and doing something and get together with a group of people. So this afternoon we're going to look at all of this as really a call to action and being part of the movement, as you all are. And I want to look at that and talk about it, invite you to talk about it. Let's take 2 minutes again. Turn to the person next to you if you want to turn to a different person. 1 minute. Just share any thoughts, words, things that stirs up for you. It's the other person listen, then I'll have you switch. Turn to the person next to you and just reflect for a moment about any of these things I'm talking about. This, you all know, it's just kindergarten level stuff, and it's the easiest thing in the whole world and the hardest thing there is to do at the same time. Talking about really going deeper into loving, creative, active nonviolence. In our hearts, with everybody in our lives, with everybody in Maine, with all the creatures, Mother Earth, an attitude of engaged nonviolence with every human being on the planet.